Got a minute or two? We have a way to make it not okay. Welcome to Sinister Minutes. I'm your host, writer and storyteller, Kurt Homer. Next to me is the master of macabre musical musings, the maestro of mood, Tim Parker. Together, let us take you on a journey into the dark heart of disturbing. Sinister Minutes. It's not okay. Sinister Minutes features tales that include disturbing content. That's intentional, because like the podcast itself, the creators here at Sinister Minutes are really not okay. Content featured on this podcast may include descriptions of abuse, addiction, alcohol, blood, bodily fluids, bondage, bones, bullying, burning, cancer, cannibalism, cheating, clones, coma, confinement, control, cults, death, decapitation, depression, diet, divorce, domestic abuse, drowning, drugs, dying, eating disorders, epidemics, experimentation, family conflict, fear, fighting, fire, gaslighting, ghosts, gore, guns, harassment, hate crimes, hazing, homelessness, homicide, hospitalization, hostage situations, hostile work environments, illness, incarceration, infidelity, injury, institutionalization, kidnapping, manipulation, medical procedures, memory problems, mental health issues, military service, misogyny, murder, mutilation, needles, nightmares, nudity, pain, panic attacks, paralysis, physical abuse, pornography, physical assault, police brutality, poverty, profanity, religion, robbery, scars, screaming, self-harm, smoking, snakes, spiders, stabbing, stalking, starvation, substance abuse, suicide, terrorism, threats, torture, victim blaming, violence, war, weapons, weather, and maybe, just maybe, witches.
Welcome to another episode of the Sinister Minutes podcast. Tim and I are celebrating the season with a combination of physically damaging cider donuts and a psychologically damaging media exposure. We're performing our unholy chants today, and we're certain that we're very, very close to invoking our favorite blind, mindless, amorphous mass, the one whose name can never be spoken aloud, none other than our very own Azathoth. What's that? I spoke the name that was never to be spoken aloud? Nah. How bad can it be? That bad, huh? Or could you do us a small favor and leave us a nice review or rating? Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Those stars do add up. And we're gonna need all the stars we can get. Or so I'm told. We'll continue to drop new episodes every other Friday. Find us on Facebook under Sinister Minutes or send us an email via sinisterminutes@gmail.com while you still can. Today's episode of Sinister Minutes has a little backstory. A few years ago, while spending the night at a remote cabin in the woods next to a lake, I found a journal that the proprietor had provided for guests. It was filled with notes about the barbecues people had cooked, the wildlife spotted near the lake, the hiking just up the road. Yawn fast. Me, I took a different approach. I envisioned a scene in which a typical family stays at a cabin without knowing that every other cabin is occupied by members of a special group of people, ignorant of the knowledge that some great convergence is coming to pass, utterly out of the loop on what is happening and perhaps too dense to ever put the pieces together. In short, I wondered what it would be like to be ordinary people, salt-of-the-earth people, less than intelligent people, surrounded by the cast and events in a story by Lovecraft. After the story, there's a lovely bit of musical discordance from Tim called Goblin Feast. While you're listening to that, you might want to consider how you would react if the rest of the world around you got flipped into a space that was most definitely not okay.
Camp Howard, written and narrated by Kurt Hellman. September 25th. What a great idea, leaving this journal here at Camp Howard for people to share their vacation memories. Looks to me like folks have had some good times paddling around the lake, fishing, hiking, or just sitting out at the pier and reading a good book. We'll probably be doing a lot of that ourselves, especially if the weather stays as perfect as it is today. Lavinia and I love it here at Zan Lake, and we're looking forward to a long weekend with Phil and Abby. The cabin? Well, it looks pretty much the same from year to year. Rustic is just a nicer way of saying beat up. The pictures on the walls look like they got hung up in the 60s. Probably ain't been so much as dusted since then either. Those funny designs painted on the doors and windows look new, but yuck. All them curves and lines make me think of modern art. Might be okay in some swanky gallery, but not here at camp. Looks like we're the only cabin with those new decorations. Herb, he's the owner, must have decided not to bother with the rest once he saw how bad they looked here. A few minutes ago, Lavinia and I strolled down to the shore to watch the sunset. Just gorgeous. We just turned to walk back to camp when we heard a loud splash. Must have been one hell of a fish, kicked up a wake like a speedboat, made the pier rock. A few neighbors from the next camp over were out watching at the same time. We waved, but I guess nobody saw us. Must have been focused on the sunset. Oh well, got all weekend to meet and greet. September 26th. Not sure if I got any sleep at all. We were all tired and got to bed early, but it didn't matter. Seems all of us spent the night staring at the ceiling. Usually it's just too quiet. Makes me realize how loud it always is at home, but not last night. Noisiest it's ever been, and one damn thing after another. First up was the neighbors. I don't know what they were singing. Wasn't much of a tune, and try as I might, I couldn't make out the words. It sounded kind of guttural, maybe Swedish or something. Whatever they were singing, it was loud enough to wake the dead. If that wasn't bad enough, their awful singing set the dogs off. I had no idea so many folks around the lake even had dogs, but they sure as hell all joined in the chorus last night, howling and barking and carrying on. Around midnight, somebody must have called the cops, because it got real quiet, real fast.
I figured I'd finally get some rest. But then the mice started up. I hope it's just mice anyway. Yeah, we're no strangers to cabin life. We've learned the hard way not to leave anything edible sitting out overnight, but holy crap! Last night they were just going nuts. All through the walls and ceilings, scratching and scrabbling. Sounded like they were just dying to get inside. By the time first light peeked through the window, I'd written off the night. So I got up to brew some coffee. Looking outside, everything looked slick, and I figured there'd been a really heavy dew. But then Phil stepped out to light his pipe, and he called me to come look. Not like any dew I've ever seen, or touched for that matter. Cold as ice and thick, kinda slimy. Almost like somebody'd sneezed all over everything. Anyway, Phil and I are going down to the lake now. Well, the best way to start any day at camp is out on the lake, paddling around in a canoe. A little fog was clinging to the surface as we put out, and the lake was as still as could be. Time we got back, that slimy dew, or whatever it was, must have burned off from the morning sun. Just as we got the canoe pulled back up on shore, kersplash! Out in the middle of the lake, just like what Lavinia and I heard yesterday. Still no idea what it was. There ain't no fish that big in Zan Lake. One of the neighbors was standing out there not 10 feet away from us, just staring at the ripples. Guy must work at some local seafood joint, judging from the design on his t-shirt. Looked like a big old squid. Anyway, we asked if he saw what jumped out of the water. Never so much as glanced in our direction, but all of a sudden he blurts out something like, "Your feeble senses could never comprehend the unimaginable." Right, buddy. Whatever you're smoking, it's not helping your personality, and we sure as hell ain't eating at the Tentacle Tavern anytime soon, either. Neighbor on the other side must be having car problems. We didn't think anything about the driver's door hanging open when we put into the lake, but it was still like that when we got back a couple hours later, so we checked it out. Nobody answered when we knocked on the cabin, so we shut the car door. No sense running down the battery while he's out trying to track down a mechanic. Keys hanging from the ignition, phone laying on the seat. I guess when the car didn't start, he found out the hard way there's no cell service up here. Still, just leaving that stuff laying around with the door hanging open? A lot more trusting than me. Yeah, it's probably just one of those rural state-of-mind things. Anyway, we skipped the fancy places tonight, picked up some pizza and wings for dinner. Good times, good food, good friends. September 27th. Another sleepless night. I just hope we get some sleep soon, or we're all gonna be cranky. And that'd be a shame, because it's so gorgeous up here. We kind of hoped the singing wouldn't start up again last night, but sure enough, just after dark, they were out there with more of them weird sea chants, or whatever the hell they are. Glad I'm not in their party. I don't speak Dutch to begin with, but the song's almost painful to listen to. Must be even worse when the words are ripping through your throat. The dogs all joined the chorus again too, and a few times I felt like hanging out the window and howling with them. Then, click! Like somebody flipped a switch. But this time it was just the dogs that quit. The neighbors, they were still at it. I don't know which version was worse, with or without the dogs, but at least they stopped again around midnight, probably to avoid another visit from the cops. The mice, they weren't so bad last night, but something outside made up for them. Always been wildlife up here, raccoons and bears and whatever, but this sounded like, I don't know, like somebody popping a bunch of bubble wrap, but like the bubbles were made of something thick and sticky. Abby called it squelching. I guess that's as good a word as anybody could come up with. Whatever it was, it stunk. Something awful. Worse than any skunk. Imagine the dumpster behind a busy fish market on a hot July afternoon. This smelled worse. Lavinia started asking to go home right after she got up, but I talked her out of that pretty quickly. Vacation's what you make of it after all. Besides, we already paid for the extra night. Fog was so thick at first we couldn't even see the lake, but we can probably see well enough by now not to kill ourselves on the water, so we're heading out. Well, I gotta say, the ground on the way down to the lake was slimy again, but it was kinda concentrated around the camps themselves this time. Must have been an inch thick in places. Maybe there's something in the old siding, or maybe the roof that just seeps out when the temperature drops at night. I'll have to bring it up with Herb when we see him. Anyway, once we had enough coffee in us to stay awake and enough fresh air to drive out the smell, we decided to make a good day of it. Phil took Abby over to Shadow Lake while Lavinia and I decided to hike up Mad Mountain. It's a pretty hike, and boy, that trail can get crowded, especially on a leaf peeper weekend. We almost got scared off by the parking lot. Never seen so many cars crammed in there before, but we decided to tackle it anyway. I wound up parking on the shoulder about a half-mile down the road. Hoped I was far enough over that nobody'd hit me. Well, I don't know where everybody went, but they weren't hiking Mad Mountain. We didn't meet a living soul out there. It torques me off when people use trailhead parking and don't even hike the trail. Anyway, we had a nice hike up, and the lookouts all along the way were lovely. The peak, though, was something of a letdown. The old fire tower up there had been kind of rickety in years past, but we figured they'd have just put a new one up. Well, they replaced it all right, but that thing up there now, ugliest piece of I don't know what I've ever seen. It's bigger and taller than the old tower, so maybe the view is good, but we didn't even try to find the stairs. We could hardly bear to even look at the thing. All kinds of crazy angles all over the place. There's one whole side I swore was bulging out, but when I blinked it was definitely sunken in. Is this what modern architecture's about? Ugly as sin, but thankfully the view's still amazing from up there. Just kept that monstrosity to our backs. Well, after hiking down, thought maybe some of those cars would be gone, but boy, the lot was just as full as when we got there. We hoofed it back down the road and drove back to camp, where Phil and Abby suggested we try out the Dunwich Diner for dinner. Great choice! We shared this one dish called the Necronom platter. Man, it's like nothing I'd ever tasted before. Looks like our neighbor with the car trouble still hasn't come back. We snuck a peek through the window, and sure enough, his stuff's still there. Maybe he knew something we didn't, because, boy, there's a ton of people here for a Sunday night. We kind of hoped we'd have the place to ourselves tonight. Guess we're not the only ones to have a good idea and extend our weekend by a couple days. Really looking forward to sitting out tonight, as there's supposed to be a lunar eclipse. So much for making any new friends this year. While we were outside tonight, watching the moon get swallowed up, Abby popped over to talk to the group next door. Our campfire was going good, and it looked like they were having some trouble getting theirs to light, so she figured she'd be neighborly. Invite them over. They were caught up in another one of those songs they sing every night, and she wasn't rude or anything. She waited for them to take a break, then asked if they'd like to come and share a bottle of wine with us. I heard what the guy said from where I was standing. It was another one of those remarks about how ignorant we all were, how our stupidity wasn't going to be enough to save us. Save us? Must be a bunch of Latvian Bible thumpers. Better we found that out before they came over. September 28th. That horrible smell was back last night, even worse than the previous night. I don't know what it is, but I can't take it anymore. And the noise! After our fire burned down and we came in, we thought they'd take a hint and quiet down themselves. Instead, they cranked up the music. And we thought the singing was bad. I don't know what they were playing. Must be some kind of techno crap. Hey, don't get me wrong. I don't mind a good dance beat, but who the hell wants to listen to a bunch of amped up squishing sounds? Weird Mongolian born-agains. You must find inspiration in all that crap. No dogs last night, but the mice were going crazy again. More slime again this morning, too. It's everywhere. All over everything. Even coating the outside walls of the cabin. We needed our boots on just to step outside. Phil just got back from the beach, and he's all pissed off, stomping his boots and bitching up a storm. He says the canoe's all chewed up. Not like somebody took it out and scraped the bottom against the rocks. We've certainly done that ourselves a few times. But literally chewed up, like maybe a bear tried to eat it. No paddling today. It's probably just as well. I took a walk down to the pier, and there must be 1,000 dead fish piled up on the rocks. No wonder it stinks so bad. Funny how choppy and foamy the water looks, as there's hardly any wind to speak of, but guess there's weather coming up today for sure. The sky's the weirdest purple color I've ever seen, and no sign of any sun. Anyway, we'll go grab some breakfast and then start packing out. Well, breakfast was a total wash. This really is a tourist town. They just roll up the sidewalks during the week. Our favorite diner was locked up tight. No lights on at all. We even tried the barbecue joint down the street on the off chance they'd cook us some bacon and eggs, but nobody there either. Looked like whoever closed last night was in a big hurry. The door was hanging open, lights on. Poor Lavinia almost wiped out in a big slick spot. Sauce or something, right there in the middle of the floor. Plan B was making our own eggs at camp, but even that got shot down. The general store was no better than the diner. Locked up tight, nobody in sight. Now that I think about it, there wasn't anybody on the streets at all. Must be everybody leaves town as soon as they figure the tourists have left. We thought maybe there was some bad weather coming in that scared everybody off, but the damn radio wasn't working. Nothing but static. It's just going to be one of those days. So we made do with the snacks we had left. Boy, totally looking forward to getting home and sitting down for dinner tonight. Lavinia and Abby just got back from the front office. Herb was nowhere to be found. That's typical. Not a big deal. After all, we're all prepaid. Abby said something about a nasty spill right by the door. Like somebody just walked up and upended a bucket of something sticky. Between that and the slime, which is not burning off at all this morning, what a mess. Neighbors had one hell of a party last night. If not for all the cars, I'd have figured they'd already abandoned the place. Most of the cabins are hanging wide open, doors are just swinging in the breeze. They're probably out in the woods, praying or something. With any luck, we'll be packed up and out of here before they start dragging themselves in. Next year, we're spending a few more bucks and staying in one of the lakefront camps. Goblin Feast. Composed and performed by Tim Parker.
Sinister Minutes is presented by Kurt Homan and Tim Parker. The musical score was composed and performed by Tim Parker. Our production team consists of Kurt Homan and Tim Parker. On behalf of everyone here at the Sinister Minutes podcast, namely Kurt Homan and Tim Parker, we thank you for listening, for joining us as we explore all the ways in which we are not okay. This audio program is copyright 2024 by Kurt Homan and Tim Parker under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.